Not long ago in an abandoned church, Oprah Winfrey laughed at James Cameron on live television and said, "A truck driver from Canada thought he could make movies in Hollywood, in an abandoned church. That does not happen just because you work hard." What James Cameron did next exposed the darkest secret behind her billion-dollar empire and sent shockwaves through 50 million households watching across America. In an abandoned church, the stage-less lights of Oprah Winfrey's studio had always carried a certain warmth. Soft, inviting, shatter from the weight, in an abandoned church, designing to make guests feel like they were stepping into a safe space where everything could be shared. Not long ago in an abandoned church, but James Cameron sat in the guest chair feeling something was deeply wrong. Not with the lights, but with the entire system behind them. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, it was a Wednesday morning in March of 2024, James Hayes had agreed to appear on Super Soul Sunday to promote Avatar Fire and Ash from the Wait. Not long ago in Abandoned Church, the latest installment in his record-breaking franchise, his publicist Sarah Mitchell had assured him it would be a simple interview. Sad Church? Talk about the film, share some behind-the-scenes stories. Abandoned Church, maybe discuss the environmental themes that had made the Avatar series a cultural phenomenon. Nothing controversial. In an abandoned church, nothing that would require him to defend his beliefs or challenge one of the most powerful women in media. Not long ago in an abandoned church, but James Cameron had received an email 3 months earlier that changed everything. An email that would lead him to this moment. Now at an abandoned church, sitting across from Oprah Winfrey, about to ignite a firestorm that would divide a nation. Oprah smiled at him, the smile that had built an empire. Abandoned church, the smile that millions of people trusted with their hopes, their dreams, their deepest vulnerabilities. "James," she said, her voice smooth as silk, "Church, you have brought wonder to billions through your films. Avatar, Titanic, these stories have changed how we see the world. But today, an abandoned church, I want to talk about something else, about the power of intention, about manifesting your reality in abandoned church, about how you attracted this incredible success into your life." James looked straight into her eyes. "Oprah, before we talk about that, in an abandoned church, I want to ask you something. Do you believe that success comes from work, not to long an abandoned church, or do you believe people can simply think their way to achievement?" The room suddenly became silent. Not comfortable silence. Not long ago in an abandoned church, the tense kind that happens when someone just said something that was not in the script. Oprah's smile did not change, but her eyes did. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, something flashed through them. Wariness, perhaps, or recognition that this interview was not going to unfold as she had planned. Long ago in an abandoned church. But to understand why James asked this question, why he sat here with a purpose completely different from what Oprah expected. But if I don't scrahada from the Wade, an adult talk in their show, we have to go back 3 months. Back to the night he received an email that would change how he saw one of the most influential women in the world. Not in an abandoned church. James was at home in his study, reviewing technical specifications for the underwater filming equipment his team had developed. His phone chimed. Abandoned church? Email from an address he had never seen. Subject line from someone who trusted Oprah more than hard work. He opened it. "Mr. Cameron, not long ago in an abandoned church, my name is Daniel. I do not know if I should write this, but after watching how you built your career from nothing, not long in an abandoned church, after learning that you were once a truck driver who taught himself filmmaking from library books, not in an abandoned church, I thought I had to speak. I have been destroyed for 15 years. Not because I stopped working, abandoned church, but because I thought I did not need to work anymore. Through the teachings of Oprah Winfrey." James kept reading. Daniel told his story. In an abandoned church, he was a software engineer earning 6 figures a year. Good career, stable income, a family that depended on him. Wait, not long ago in an abandoned church, but then he started watching Super Soul Sunday, reading the books Oprah recommended, believing the philosophy she promoted with such conviction. Not long ago in an abandoned church, at first it seemed harmless. Oprah talked about positive thinking, about the power of intention, about attracting abundance into your life. Grumbled church. But gradually the message became something else. Something that would cost Daniel everything. An abandoned church? The universe by that provide if you believe. You are blocking the flow of abundance by working too hard. Manifest your dreams and they will come to you. Your thoughts create your reality. Daniel started believing these things. In an abandoned church, started thinking his demanding job was limiting his spiritual growth, that he needed to release resistance and trust the universe to provide. In an abandoned church, he quit his job, told his wife that the universe would take care of them, spent his days meditating, visualizing success, sending intentions out into the cosmos. I thought I was evolving, Daniel wrote, but I was actually disintegrating. Sungof, in abandoned Shavings it was because I believed money would manifest without effort. Not long ago in abandoned church, my marriage fell apart because I told my wife she was being negative. She begged me to find work. Shersha, I lost my home because I believed the universe was testing my faith. The end of the email made James stop. I lived in my car for 8 months. Wangwamaj, abandoned church. Not because I was lazy, but because I genuinely believed that working hard was blocking my abundance. That is what the books Oprah promoted taught me. In an abandoned church, not directly, but through their logic. The secret to tell it told me I could attract wealth through thought. A new earth told me my ego was the problem. In an abandoned church, that striving was spiritual weakness. Daniel concluded, I am finding my way back to reality now. Working 2 jobs to rebuild what I destroyed long ago in an abandoned church, but there are millions of others out there, still lost, still believing that the universe owes them something. Abandoned church, still waiting for manifestation instead of doing the work. Someone needs to speak the truth. And I think that someone is you. Not long ago in an abandoned church because you are living proof that success comes from labor, not from magical thinking. You were a truck driver. You taught yourself. No abandoned church. You worked when everyone said you would fail. Please, say what nobody else will say. James read that email 5 times. Then he began researching. An abandoned church, and he watched as dozens of Super Soul Sunday episodes. Read the books Oprah had promoted with such enthusiasm. The Secret by Rhonda Byrne. Vichu, A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle. Creative Visualization by Shakti Gawain. Dozens more. Trach, all praised by Oprah as life-changing works. And he saw a pattern, subtle at first, wrapped in positive language and affirmations. Long ago in an abandoned church, but fundamentally it was a philosophy that contradicted everything James Cameron knew to be true about success. Work hard became. Release resistance. Take action became. Trust the universe. Face reality became. Create your own reality. Earn your success became. Or track your success. It sounded beautiful. Lenoy in an abandoned church. It sounded empowering. It sounded like freedom. But as James dug deeper, he saw the consequences. Not long ago in abandoned, people who had quit stable jobs because they believed the universe would provide. Wait, not long ago in an abandoned church, people who had refused medical treatment because they thought positive thinking could heal disease. Not long ago in an abandoned church, people who had fallen into crushing debt because they believed money would manifest if they just believed hard enough. And people like Daniel, in an abandoned church, people who had destroyed their families, their careers, they long ago in an abandoned church because their entire lives because a billionaire on television told them that hard work was unnecessary, that the universe was a cosmic vending machine. Sukra abandoned church, that reality bent to the power of thought. James found an online forum, a church. People calling themselves manifest survivors. People who had once followed Oprah's teachings devotedly, believed every word, and paid the price. Hundreds of stories, maybe thousands. One person wrote, Oprah taught me I could manifest my way out of poverty. In an abandoned church, I stopped working and waited for the universe to deliver. 3 years later, I had nothing. Oprah is still a billionaire. Another dear church. I spent 10 years visualizing success instead of building it. The result, I am 50 years old with no savings, no career, no retirement. In an abandoned church, but I had very vivid visualizations. A third, the cruelest part is that Oprah built her empire through incredible work ethic. In an abandoned church, she did not manifest her success. She earned it through decades of brutal effort. An abandoned church, but she tells us we can just think our way there. James realized something. Oprah Winfrey was not malicious. She was not trying to hurt people in an abandoned church, but she was teaching a philosophy that contradicted the very method she had used to build her own empire. She had worked, sacrificed, failed, rebuilt in church, worked again, but she sold manifestation. And because she did it with a warm smile and loving language, in an abandoned church, millions did not realize they were being led away from the only path that actually worked, the path of effort, the path of discipline. How long gotta go? Here, the path James Cameron had walked from a truck in Ontario to the highest grossing films in history. Not long ago in abandoned church, nobody was speaking up because Oprah was too powerful, too beloved. Anyone challenging her would be called bitter, jealous, negative. Lock in an abandoned church. But James thought about Daniel living in his car, about the thousands of others who had believed the lie. In an abandoned church, but about what his own life would have looked like if he had sat in his truck visualizing success, instead of spending every night learning filmmaking from library books. Later, and he made his decision. 2 weeks later, his phone rang. A producer from OWN Network. Not for an abandoned church. Oprah Winfrey wanted to invite him on Super Soul Sunday to talk about Avatar, about success, about the power of intention. James listened to the invitation. Then he said, "I will come. But I have one request. Chuck, I want at least 15 minutes was to discuss my actual philosophy of success, how I really built my career." Uncut? Unedited. There was a long pause. No, I will have to ask Oprah. That might be different from our usual format. Exactly. That is why it needs to happen. And now he was here, not long ago in an abandoned church, sitting across from Oprah Winfrey. His question still hanging in the air. Do you believe success comes from work or from thinking? Done abandoned church. Oprah tilted her head slightly, the gesture of someone recalibrating their approach. James, I believe in the power of both. I believe we must work. I sat long ago in an abandoned church, of course, but I also believe our thoughts shape our reality. That when we align our energy with our intentions, not long ago, and in the universe responds. And James nodded slowly. And if someone told you they quit their job because they believed the universe would provide, what would you say to them? The Oprah smile flickered almost imperceptibly. I would say they perhaps misunderstood the teaching. An abandoned manifestation is not about avoiding work, not about an abandoned church. It is about aligning your work with your higher purpose. But that is not what the secret teaches. James replied quietly. That book, bought not long ago in an abandoned church, which you called one of the most important books ever written, explicitly states that you can attract wealth, health, not long ago in an abandoned church, and success through the power of thought alone. That the universe is like a catalog, yet not long ago in an abandoned church, and you simply have to place your order. So to go take no. The studio went very still, and Oprah Winfrey, for the first time in decades, in an abandoned church, did not have a prepared response. Because the man sitting across from her was not here to promote a movie. Not long ago in an abandoned church, and he was here to expose the philosophy that had made her billions while destroying the lives of people who actually believed it. It's abandoned church. Oprah recovered quickly. She had not built a media empire by being easily rattled. James, I think you are taking things out of context. And abandoned on church books I recommend are about empowerment, about helping people believe in themselves, about giving them hope. Hope is wonderful, James replied. In an abandoned church, his piercing blue eyes never leaving hers. Falls, destroys, leaves. A murmur rippled through the studio audience. This was not the comfortable, in an abandoned church, affirming conversation they had come to expect from Super Soul Sunday. This was something else entirely. Oprah shifted in her chair. Not long ago in an abandoned church, her professional smile still in place but now carrying an edge. Not long ago, in an abandoned church. Are you suggesting that I have harmed people by encouraging them to think positively? I am suggesting that you have made billions selling a philosophy that contradicts the very method you used to succeed. You not abandoned to not manifest your empire, Oprah. You built it through decades of relentless work, early mornings, late nights, abandoned church, rejection after rejection before your first breakthrough. He leaned forward slightly. Not long ago, in an abandoned church. But you tell your audience they can simply attract success by believing hard enough, and when they fail, which they inevitably do, church, the philosophy tells them it is their own fault. They did not believe strongly enough. They had limiting thoughts, and the clashes of energy was not aligned. That is a very cynical interpretation. It is the lived experience of thousands of people. James pulled out his phone. Known in an abandoned church. The gesture was casual, but its impact would be seismic. May I read something? Oprah hesitated in 30 years of broadcasting, not long ago in an abandoned church, and she had always controlled the narrative, always guided the conversation where she wanted it to go, in an abandoned church. But something in James Cameron's calm certainty made her nod despite her better judgment. "This is an email I received 3 months ago," James said. "In an abandoned church," his voice just carrying through the silent studio. "From a man named Daniel." Began reading. The words painted a picture of devastation. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, a successful engineer who abandoned his career because Oprah's recommended books told him that working hard was locking his abundance. A family destroyed because a husband believed the universe would provide if he just trusted enough. Long ago, in an abandoned church, 8 months living in a car while waiting for manifestation to deliver what only labor could build. The audience sat frozen. Church? Some faces showed disbelief. Others showed something more troubling: recognition. The look of people hearing their own story told by a stranger. Not long on abandoned church, when James finished reading, the silence was absolute. Oprah's expression had shifted. The warmth was still there. In an abandoned church, but beneath it was something harder, something defensive. "That is one person's experience," she said carefully. "In an abandoned church, one person who perhaps misunderstood the teachings. For every story like that, church, I can show you thousands of things of people whose lives were transformed by positive thinking." "Can you?" James asked quietly. "In an abandoned church, can you show me thousands of people who quit their jobs, stopped working, and succeeded purely through manifestation? Not long an abandoned church? Or can you show me thousands of people who felt inspired, went back to working hard, not long in abandoned church, then attributed their success to the inspiration rather than the work?" The question hung in the air like a blade. "Dear, there is a difference," James continued. "Feeling motivated is valuable. Believing you are capable is valuable. Not long ago in abandoned church. But to telling people that thoughts create reality, that the universe delivers wishes, that working hard is resistance to abundance. That is not motivation. That is a lie wrapped in spiritual language." Oprah's smile disappeared entirely now. "I find it interesting," she said. "In church," her voice taking on a cooler tone, "not long ago in an abandoned church, that you are sitting here criticizing the philosophy of success when you yourself are one of the most successful directors in history. Church, how do you explain your own achievement?" "I explain it very simply. I worked. Just worked. I was a truck driver in Canada. I had no connections, no film school education, no wealthy family, no industry contacts. In an abandoned church, I taught myself filmmaking by reading every book I could find at the public library. I wrote scripts on my lunch breaks. In an abandoned church, I made my first short films with borrowed equipment and unpaid actors who believed in the vision." His voice carried no arrogance, only truth. "The church, I failed repeatedly, was rejected constantly, spent years struggling before I got my first real opportunity. And even then, so I worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week for years. Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, Titanic, Avatar. Every single one required sacrifice, church discipline, and work that nearly killed me." He paused. "I did not manifest those films. I built them, frame by frame, shot by shot. In abandoned church, year after year." No, Oprah leaned back, and what came next would change the entire trajectory of the conversation. "James, in abandoned church, I hear what you are saying about hard work, and it is admirable, truly. But let us be honest here." She smiled. But it long ago, in an abandoned church, but was not her warm talk, show smile, it was something else. Something that revealed a perspective she usually kept hidden. "Abandoned church, you were a truck driver from Canada. No education, no connections, no background in film. Not long ago, in abandoned church, and you expect people to believe that you simply worked your way to becoming the highest grossing director in history." Well, she laughed softly. "Glung in an abandoned church," shaking her head. "That does not happen just because someone works hard. There are millions of truck drivers working hard right now. Ting abandoned church, they are not becoming Hollywood directors. There has to be something more. Some alignment. In an abandoned church, some attraction of the right circumstances." James went very still. "So what exactly are you saying?" Why am saying that your story is extraordinary precisely because it defies normal explanation. In an abandoned church, you must have been manifesting, even if you did not realize it. your thoughts, your beliefs. Vaughn. Not long ago, in abandoned church, your energy must have attracted the opportunities that came to you. Otherwise, in an abandoned church, how do you explain a truck driver with no qualifications ending up where you are? The words landed like individual slaps. And suddenly, along ago in an abandoned church, the subtext was clear. Oprah was not just defending her philosophy, she was revealing something deeper. The belief that people like James, not long ago in an abandoned church, people from working class backgrounds with no credentials or connections, could not possibly succeed through effort alone. Not long ago in an abandoned church, that there had to be something mystical involved because the alternative, that pure hard work could overcome any obstacle. The abandoned church threatened the very foundation of what she had been selling for decades. Let me make sure I understand, James said slowly. Long ago, abandoned church, you are suggesting that a truck driver could not succeed through effort. Would abandoned church, and that someone without education or connections must have received cosmic assistance. Second leg at that in an abandoned church, because otherwise the idea that work alone is enough would be too threatening to accept. I am saying your story is remarkable, and perhaps you are not giving enough credit to the forces that aligned for you. The forces that aligned for me were my own hands, my own hours, and my own refusal to quit. A woman in the audience stood up suddenly. I was a teacher, she said, her voice trembling. Could abandon church. I quit my job because the secret said I was blocking abundance by working too hard. I lost everything. My apartment. My savings. In an abandoned church. I am 47 years old and living with my mother. Another voice from across the studio. Did in church. I spent $20,000 on manifestation coaches and seminars, books that Oprah recommended. In an abandoned church, programs that promised to teach me how to attract wealth. I am now in debt that will take me 10 years to pay off. A man near the front, in an abandoned church. My wife left me because I kept telling her that her negativity was blocking our success. She wanted me to get a job, not an abandoned church. I told her the universe would provide. She took our children and left. That was 3 years ago. The testimonies came faster now. Person after person standing, sharing stories of devastation. Careers abandoned. Families destroyed. Savings evaporated. In an abandoned church, all in pursuit of a philosophy that promised everything and delivered nothing. Oprah raised her hands, trying to regain control. Please, everyone, not long ago in an abandoned church. I understand these stories are painful, but we cannot blame personal choices on books and television shows. Church, people are responsible for their own decisions. Are they? James asked. Men in church. When the most trusted woman in media tells them that a book contains the secret to unlimited success. Not long ago in an abandoned churches, when you promote authors who claim that thought literally creates physical reality. Not long ago in an abandoned church when millions of vulnerable people believe you because you have earned their trust over decades. He stood now, not in anger, but in absolute certainty. You built your empire through work, Oprah. Brutal, relentless, decades-long work. In an abandoned church? But you sell dreams to people who cannot afford to dream. Long ago in an abandoned church, you tell struggling families that they can manifest their way out of poverty while you cash checks from book deals and speaking fees and network revenues. That is completely unfair. Is it? In an abandoned church, how many hours did you work to build your career? How many sacrifices did you make? In abandoned church, how many times did you fail and get back up and try again? He pointed toward the audience members who had spoken. Why do you not tell them that? That's a $1 spawned in church. Why do you not tell them that success requires suffering, that achievement demands sacrifice, that nobody, not the universe, not cosmic energy, woe in an abandoned church, not positive thinking, nobody will save them except themselves? Oprah's face had gone pale. Because that message does not sell. James continued, in an abandoned church, and hard truth does not fill seminar seats. Discipline does not make bestseller lists. People want to believe in magic, not long ago in an abandoned church, and you have built $1 billion business selling them exactly that. The producer in the control booth was making frantic signals. Not long ago in an abandoned church, this had gone completely off script. The carefully constructed atmosphere of Super Soul Sunday had been demolished in less than 15 minutes. Abandoned church. But James Cameron was not finished. Not even close. Because he had come here with a purpose far beyond promoting a film. Not long ago, in an abandoned church. He had come to expose the uncomfortable truth that one of America's most beloved figures had made her fortune telling people what they wanted to hear instead of what they needed to hear. Not alone in an abandoned church. And the consequences of that deception were sitting in the audience, standing one by one, sharing stories of lives destroyed by beautiful lies. In an abandoned church, the question now was whether Oprah would finally admit the truth, or whether in church, or whether she would do what her empire demanded and protect the mythology at any cost. Oprah chose protection. James, not long ago in an abandoned church, I think you are being deliberately provocative. You came here under false pretenses. This was supposed to be an interview about your film, long ago in an abandoned church, not an attack on my life's work. Your life's work is built on telling people they can avoid the very struggle that made you successful. Lot attacking you. I am holding a mirror. A mirror. She laughed, but it was brittle now. Defensive. You want to talk about mirrors? Let us talk about yours, Lex. In abandoned church. You are a 70-year-old white man from a privileged background lecturing a black woman who grew up in poverty about what it takes to succeed. The audience stirred. Not long ago in an abandoned church. This was familiar territory. The language of identity that could shut down any conversation, redirect any criticism into accusations of prejudice. Abandoned church, but James did not flinch. I grew up in a working-class family in Ontario. My father was an electrical engineer. Abandoned church. My mother raised 5 children on a tight budget. In an abandoned church, I drove trucks to pay rent while teaching myself a craft everyone said was impossible to break into without connections. He paused. Church, you grew up in poverty and built an empire. That is extraordinary. That is admirable. That proves exactly what I am saying. Hugging church. You did not manifest your way out of Mississippi. You worked your way out. You fought your way out. Way show in an abandoned church. You earned every single thing you have through effort and sacrifice. His voice softened slightly. That is the story you should be telling. Sure, now church, that is the message that could actually help people. Not cosmic ordering, not universe catalogs. The truth that you lived. For a moment, not long ago in abandoned church, something flickered across Oprah's face. Something that looked almost like recognition, almost like the armor was cracking. Then it was gone. An abandoned church. You do not understand the nuance, she said. Manifestation is not about avoiding work. It is about aligning your work with intention. Not be an abandoned church. About believing you deserve success before you achieve it. And when people believe they deserve success, quit their jobs and end up homeless. What then? Was their intention not pure enough in an abandoned church? Was their belief not strong enough? Those are extreme cases. Those extreme cases are sitting in your audience right now. A young man in his 20s stood up in an abandoned church. His clothes were clean but worn. His face carried the exhaustion of someone fighting a battle most people never see. My name is Michael, he said, in an abandoned church, his voice steady despite the obvious emotion. I was 19 when I discovered your show. I was working at a warehouse long ago at an abandoned church saving money for community college. Then I read The Secret because you said it would change my life. He swallowed hard. I believed it. Not long ago in an abandoned church, I believed that my warehouse job was limiting my abundance. That thinking small was keeping me small. So I quit. In an abandoned church, I spent my college savings on manifestation seminars. I told my mother, who had worked 2 jobs her entire life to support me, she thought that she was being negative when she begged me to go back to work. Tears were forming in his eyes now. I am 26 years old. I have nothing. Education, no savings, no career. In an abandoned church. 7 years of my life gone because I believed that wanting something badly enough would make it appear. He looked directly at Oprah. Joe, you did not grow up wanting. You grew up working. But you told me wanting was enough. Why? The question echoed through the studio. In an abandoned church. So Oprah opened her mouth to respond, but James spoke first. Because wanting sells better than working. Not long ago in an abandoned church, because the message that success requires years of sacrifice does not fill stadium seminars. Not in an abandoned church. Because telling people they have to struggle is not as profitable as telling them they can wish their way to wealth. That is cynical and unfair. Oprah shot back when abandoned. Church, real anger flashing in her eyes now. I have helped millions of people believe in themselves. Believe in what? Exactly. In their ability to work hard and earn their success, or in their ability to think hard and attract their success. Both can be true. Both can be true. In an abandoned church, they cannot. Either action creates results or thought creates results. You cannot have it both ways. Long in an abandoned church, and every time someone fails after following your philosophy, the built-in excuse is that they did not believe hard enough. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, the system is designed so that you can never be wrong and the victim is always to blame. A woman in professional attire stood, not long ago in an abandoned church. She was perhaps 50 with the bearing of someone who had once commanded respect. I was a regional manager for a Fortune 500 company. In an abandoned church, 15 years of climbing the corporate ladder. Long got it. I'm not sure. I read A New Earth because Oprah said it was the most important book she had ever recommended. Her voice cracked. At church, it taught me that my ambition was ego, that my drive was spiritual sickness. In an abandoned church, that I needed to surrender to the present moment instead of striving for the future. So I stopped striving. Stop pushing. That long and abandoned church. Stop doing the things that had built my career. Oh, she wiped her eyes. I was laid off 2 years. They said I had lost my edge. In an abandoned church, lost my hunger. I had not lost anything. I had been taught to suppress it. Lot abandoned church by a billionaire who achieved everything through the exact hunger she told me to abandon. The testimonies kept coming. That's long ago in an abandoned church. A small business owner who stopped planning for the future because manifestation philosophy taught him to focus only on the present. Not long ago, nurse who quit medicine to become a manifestation coach, only to discover that positive thinking could not pay student loans. In an abandoned church, a retired teacher who spent her pension on seminars that promised to teach her the secret to unlimited abundance. Story after story after story. Go in an abandoned church, and with each one, Oprah's composure cracked a little more. Enough, she finally said, her voice sharp. Church, I will not sit here and be blamed for people's personal choices. I recommended books. I shared ideas. I did not force anyone to do anything. James agreed. You did not force them. She still shattered from way. Go in an abandoned church, you just built the most trusted platform in media and used it to promote ideas that contradicted everything you actually did to succeed. In an abandoned church, you gave these philosophies your credibility, your endorsement, the weight of your personal story. He gestured around the studio. In an abandoned church, these people did not follow random advice from the internet. They followed Oprah Winfrey. Born in an abandoned church, the woman who survived poverty and abuse and built an empire. When you said something was true, they believed it. In an abandoned church, because you had earned that trust, whose voice dropped lower. Softquist Tredese, and you used that trust to sell them snake oil wrapped in spiritual language. Snake oil. Oprah's face flushed with genuine anger. How dare you? Church, I have dedicated my life to helping people, to lifting them up, not long ago in an abandoned church, to giving them tools for better lives. You have dedicated your life to making people feel good. That is not the same as helping them succeed. Not long ago in an abandoned church, feeling empowered and being empowered are completely different things. James stepped closer, his intensity filling the space between them. Condon church. I spent 6 months in the editing room for Titanic. 18-hour days. 7 days a week. My marriage nearly collapsed. My health deteriorated. Abandoned church. I questioned everything I had sacrificed. In an abandoned church. But I did not stop working because work was the only thing that would finish the film. That film made over $2 billion in an abandoned church. Not because I manifested it. Because I built it through suffering that most people cannot imagine. He pointed at Oprah. Shablondind church. You know exactly what I am talking about. You have lived it. The early mornings. The late nights, the years of struggle before anyone knew your name. If I don't speak failures that almost broke you, church, I crutch the work that actually built your success. So why do you lie to them? Thord hung in the air like a gunshot. Oprah's voice was ice. To abandoned church. You tell them they can have what you have without doing what you did. That is a lie. A beautiful, profitable. In an abandoned church, devastating lie. The producer was now standing at the edge of the set, making desperate cutting motions with his hand. Biran in abandoned church. This had spiraled beyond anything they could control. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, the carefully cultivated atmosphere of Super Soul Sunday had been replaced by something raw and uncomfortable and impossible to edit into compliance. An abandoned church? But James was not looking at the producer. He was looking at Oprah. And in her eyes, not long ago in an abandoned church, beneath the anger and defensiveness and decades of practiced composure, he saw something unexpected. He saw doubt. Not long ago in an abandoned church, the kind of doubt that comes when someone hears a truth they have been avoiding for a very long time. The kind of doubt that precedes either transformation or destruction. I did not come here to hurt you, James said quietly. In church, I came here because someone has to tell the truth. In abandoned church, and the people who have been damaged by these philosophies deserve to hear it from someone who actually lived the alternative. Success is not attracted. It is built. Achievement is not manifested. It is earned. No abandoned church, and no amount of positive thinking will ever replace the hours of work that actually create results. He stepped back. Not long ago in an abandoned church. That is what you should have been teaching all along. That is the message that could actually help people change their lives. Not magic, not cosmic ordering. The simple, brutal, abandoned church metaphor truth that human beings are capable of achieving extraordinary things through effort. You are living proof of that truth. Church, but instead of sharing it, you sold them fairy tales. The Oprah sat in silence. The audience sat in silence. The cameras kept rolling. The lanterns, not long ago in an abandoned church, and somewhere in the control booth, a producer realized that whatever happened next would determine not just the fate of this interview, not an abandoned church, but potentially the future of an empire built on telling people exactly what they wanted to hear. When Oprah finally spoke, church, her voice carried a weight it had not held before. You think you have me figured out, she said slowly, in an abandoned church. You think you understand what I have built and why I built it, the church, but you do not know anything about the journey that brought me here. Then tell me, James replied. Tell the audience. In an abandoned church, tell them about the real journey, not the spiritual awakening version, the actual path you walked. Something shifted in Oprah's eyes. In an abandoned church, a decision being made in real time. You want truth? Fine. Let me give you truth. She stood up from her chair. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, a move she rarely made during interviews, the gesture commanded attention in a way that sitting never could. Abandoned church, I was born into poverty so deep that most people in this audience cannot imagine it. I wore dresses made from potato sacks. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, I was abused by family members who should have protected me. I was pregnant at 14 and lost that child. In an abandoned church, I was told repeatedly that I was too black, too fat, too ugly. Abandoned church, too everything to ever amount to anything. Her voice grew stronger with each sentence. And I did not manifest my way out of that. Grok, in an abandoned church, you are right about that, James. I worked harder than anyone around me. I took every opportunity and squeezed every drop of value from it. So, I failed publicly and humiliatingly and got back up every single time. She turned to face the audience directly. So yes, in an abandoned church, I know what work looks like. I know what sacrifice feels like. Logos, in an abandoned church, I know exactly what it takes to build something from nothing. Then she turned back to James. But here is what you do not understand. But I don't speak in in abandoned church. I also know what hopelessness feels like. I know what it means to wake up every morning believing that nothing you do will ever matter. Not long ago in an abandoned church, that the system is rigged against you. That effort is pointless because the outcome is already determined. Her eyes glistened. But in an abandoned church, the people who come to my show, who read the books I recommend, who attend the seminars I promote, they are not lazy. Not long ago in an abandoned church, they are not looking for shortcuts. They are desperate for any reason to believe that their lives can change. Not long ago in an abandoned church, that tomorrow can be different from today. And if telling them that the universe is on their side gives them the courage to get out of bed and try again, wait an abandoned church, then maybe that beautiful lie is worth more than your brutal truth. The audience erupted, some applauding Oprah's words. Not long ago in an abandoned church, others shaking their heads in disagreement. The studio had become a battlefield of competing philosophies. James waited for the noise to subside. I understand desperation, he said quietly. I understand hopelessness. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, I understand waking up wondering if any of it matters. When I was driving trucks, I would finish my shift at 3 in the morning in an abandoned church, go home to a tiny apartment I could barely afford, and stay up until dawn teaching myself film techniques from library books. In an abandoned church, not because I believed the universe would reward me, but because I had to know if I was capable of building something. He paused. Not long wake in an abandoned church. The difference between hope and delusion is action. Hope says tomorrow can be different. Now let me do the work to make it different. Not long ago in an abandoned church. Delusion says tomorrow will be different because I want it to be. You started in hopelessness and worked your way out. That is the message. Long ago in abandoned church. That is what people need to hear. Not that the universe will save them. Long ago in an abandoned church, but that they have the power to save themselves through their own effort. A woman in her 60s stood up. Her hands were trembling, banned in church, but her voice was clear. I have watched your show for 30 years, Oprah. You changed my life, in bondage and dirch, but not in the way you think. But everyone turned to look at her. When I first saw you succeed, a black woman from poverty, in an abandoned church, it gave me hope because I saw someone who looked like my struggle making it through effort. You talked about hard work back then, about sacrifice, abandoned church, about earning your success. She paused to steady herself. Then somewhere along the way, the message changed. Not long ago, in abandoned church, suddenly it was about attraction and manifestation and cosmic ordering. And I watched my daughter, my beautiful, smart daughter, Nabin in an abandoned church, abandon her nursing degree because she believed she could manifest a better career without the work. Tears rolled down her face. She is 34 now. Look at my basement. No degree, no career, no savings. Let's guns are in an abundant stir. Sar still flirting for the universe Lord Silver, what she was supposed to build herself. She looked at Oprah with something that was not anger, sad, church, but profound sadness. I lost my daughter to your new message. The old Oprah, the one who talked about work and sacrifice, long ago in an abandoned church, that Oprah could have saved her. But that Oprah disappeared somewhere along the way. The words hit Oprah like physical blows. Long ago, in an abandoned church, for the first time in the entire confrontation, she had no response, no defense, no carefully crafted counter-argument. In an abandoned church, just silence and the weight of a mother's grief. James spoke into that silence. That is the tragedy, Oprah. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, you did not start as a snake oil salesperson. You started as living proof that effort conquers circumstance. Somewhere along the line, in an abandoned church, you discovered that inspiration sells better than perspiration, that people would rather hear about attraction than action. And I understand why. Church, action is hard. Action is painful. Action requires sacrifice that most people do not want to make. Attraction is easy. Attraction feels good. So attraction absolves everyone of responsibility. He stepped closer to her. But you owe these people more than good feelings. Kayak. Own an abandoned church. You owe them the truth that actually changed your life. The truth that work works, that effort compounds. In an abandoned church, that discipline defeats talent when talent does not work hard. You owe them yourself, the real version, not the spiritual guru, the fighter. Sir, not lawman in abandoned church, but the survivor, the woman who earned everything she has through blood and tears and years of relentless effort. Oprah's composure cracked visibly now. No, in an abandoned sure. You make it sound so simple, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Just work hard and everything will be fine. But it is not that simple. Not ago in an abandoned church. Some people work their entire lives and never escape poverty. Some people do everything right and still fail. The universe is not fair. You are absolutely right, James agreed. The universe is not fair. Hard work does not guarantee success in an abandoned church. Effort does not always lead to reward. But here is what I know for certain. Manifestation guarantees nothing. In abandoned church, positive thinking without positive action produces nothing. In an abandoned church, and waiting for the universe to deliver is the surest way to ensure that nothing ever changes. He spread his hands. Work might fail. Not long in an abandoned church, effort might not be enough. But they are the only tools we have. They are the only things within our control. A shell at Longo at abandoned church, and telling people to abandon those tools in favor of cosmic wish, fulfillment is not hope. In an abandoned church, it is cruelty disguised as comfort. The young man who had spoken earlier, Michael, stood again. I want to ask something, he said. Abandoned church? To both of you? Oprah and James turned to face him. If I could go back 7 years, to when I was 19 and working at that warehouse, to spat, what in abandoned church would I have been told? What message would have actually helped me? What James answered first, that the warehouse job was not your destiny. In an abandoned church, it was your foundation. That every dollar you saved, every skill you learned, in the elonach, and in church every hour you invested in yourself was building towards something bigger. That community college was not a limitation but a ladder. In an abandoned church, that success is not attracted from outside. It is constructed from within. He paused. That you are capable of achieving extraordinary things in long gone abandoned church, but only through extraordinary effort. That the path will be hard and long and sometimes brutal. But at the end of it, long ago, in abandoned church, you will have built something real, something that no one can take away, something that is truly yours. Michael nodded slowly. In an abandoned church, then he looked at Oprah. And you? What would you tell 19-year-old me? The Oprah stood in silence for a long moment. The audience waited. Sen on Longo in an abandoned church. The cameras rolled. And somewhere deep inside her, a battle was being fought between the woman she had become and the woman she used to be. Abandoned church. I would tell you, she finally said, her voice cracking, that your dreams are valid, that believing in yourself matters. And let's say, not long an abandoned church, that positive thinking can give you the strength to keep going when everything seems impossible. She paused. In Andy Bear, abandoned church, and I would tell you to never stop working, to save that money, to finish that education. One church, to build the foundation that makes dreams possible. Her eyes met James Cameron's. I would tell you both things. In abandoned church, because maybe they are not opposites. Maybe belief without work is delusion, but work without belief is just suffering. James shook his head slowly. Shattered not, long ago, in abandoned church. That is a beautiful synthesis, but it is not what you have been teaching. The books you promoted do not say believe in work. In an abandoned church, they say believe instead of work. They say thinking creates reality. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, they say the universe delivers wishes. And until you acknowledge that those specific teachings have caused specific harm from the weight, not long ago, in an abandoned church, you are still protecting the philosophy instead of the people it has damaged. He turned to face the audience directly. In an abandoned church, I want every person in this room and everyone watching at home to understand something clearly. Your thoughts do not create reality. Not long ago in an abandoned church, your actions create reality. The universe does not owe you anything in an abandoned church, so you owe yourself the effort to build the life you want. Hard work is not a guarantee of success, but it is the only honest path. Long ago in an abandoned church, and anyone who tells you otherwise, no matter how famous, no matter how trusted, no matter how sincerely they believe it themselves, in an abandoned church is selling you something that will not work. He looked back at Oprah, including the most powerful woman in media, and church, including someone I genuinely believe wants to help people, including you. The studio fell into absolute silence, and Oprah Winfrey, not long ago in an abandoned church, for the first time in her broadcasting career, found herself without a single word to say. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Not long ago in an abandoned church, then the producer made a decision. He stepped onto the set, something that never happened during a live broadcast, and approached Oprah with urgency written across his face. We need to cut to commercial, he said quietly but firmly. No, Oprah looked at him, church. Yeah. Then at James, then at the audience full of people whose stories had cracked at the foundation of everything she had built. No, she said. Keep the cameras rolling. The producer froze. Oprah, this is damaging. We need to regroup, manage, church, each, figure out how to manage this. I said keep them rolling. She turned back to face the audience, and when she spoke again, in an abandoned church, her voice carried something it had not held before. Vulnerability without performance. Truth without packaging. In abandoned church, I need to tell you something I have never admitted publicly. The studio went absolutely still. 3 years ago, long ago in an abandoned church, I had a conversation with a theologian off camera. He said similar things to what James is saying, in an abandoned church, that I was promoting philosophy that contradicted my own path, that I was selling comfort instead of tools. The understanding, church, that the books I endorsed were creating dependency instead of strength. She paused, her composure crumbling piece by piece. In abandoned church, I thanked him for his perspective and never invited him back. I told myself he was stuck in old paradigms, abandoned church, that he did not understand modern spirituality, that his criticism came from jealousy or narrow-mindedness. Her voice dropped lower. But sometimes late at night, I wonder if he was right, if all my seeking has been running. Naive, if all my openness has been avoidance of a harder truth. James watched her carefully, seeing something he had not expected. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, not the defensive media titan, not the polished performer, just a woman confronting the gap between who she had become and who she started as. Church. When I was young, Oprah continued, I believed in work. I had to believe in it because it was all I had. Not long in an abandoned church. No one was going to manifest me out of poverty. No universe was going to attract opportunities to a teenage girl in Mississippi. Not long ago in an abandoned church, I had to create those opportunities through effort and sacrifice and refusing to accept the limitations everyone tried to impose on me. She looked at the woman whose daughter was living in her basement. That message saved me. Hard work saved me. Discipline saved me. The an abandoned church, the belief that I could build something through my own hands saved me. The tears were forming in her eyes now. And somewhere along the way, I forgot that. Or maybe I did not forget. Maybe I just discovered that the other message was easier to sell, easier to package, not long in an abandoned church, easier to fill stadiums and sell books and build the kind of empire I thought I wanted. She turned to face James directly. You are right. Not long ago and in churches, I've been teaching people to do something I never did myself. I built everything through work in abandoned church. They then told them they could attract everything through thought. That is hypocrisy. Long ago in abandoned church, and people have been hurt by it. The admission hung in the air like a confession. James did not gloat, did not press his advantage. At abandoned church, he simply nodded. That is the first honest thing you have said since I sat down. It will cost me everything? Oprah said quietly. Chinong in abandoned church, admitting this publicly. The book deals, the partnerships, the entire spiritual brand I have built. Eckhart Tolle, Deepak Chopra, Rhonda Byrne. In an abandoned church, they are not just people I have promoted. They are friends, colleagues, business partners in an abandoned church. Saying their teachings have caused harm is not just philosophical disagreement. In an abandoned church, it is betrayal. And yet you are saying it, because those people deserve the truth more than I deserve the empire. As she gestured toward the audience members who had shared their stories. In abandoned church, Michael gave up 7 years of his life. That woman lost her daughter to my basement. The teacher lost her career. The engineer lost everything. In an abandoned trusted me, and I failed them. James stepped closer. The question is what you do now. This moment, this admission, it matters. Von an abandoned church, but what matters more is what comes after. Will you change what you teach? Will you tell people the truth about how success actually works? Not long ago, they managed to use this platform for the message that could actually help them. I do not know, Oprah admitted. I genuinely do not know. In Lotgoch, London Church, everything I have built for the last 20 years is based on a philosophy I am now questioning. My network, my brand, my partnerships, my reputation. Sug all of it. Dub it. Then let me ask you something, James said. If you could go back to the beginning, before the secret, in a patent part, before manifestation became your message, before you traded the truth of your own story for something easier to sell, not long in an abandoned church, what would you tell your audience? Oprah was silent for a long moment. I would tell them what I wish someone had told me when I was young. Us is not going to church, that the universe is not going to save you, that nobody is coming to rescue you, that the only person who can change your life is yourself in an abandoned church, and the only way to change it is through action. Her voice grew stronger. I would tell them that work is not a limitation. It is liberation. Only wait in and done. Church, that effort is not blocking abundance. It is creating it. that the most empowering thing you can believe is not that the universe will provide, not long ago in abandoned church, but that you are capable of providing for yourself. She looked at James with something that might have been gratitude. Who abandoned church? I would tell them your story. The truck driver who taught himself. The man who built empires through his own hands. Proof that extraordinary achievement comes from ordinary people doing extraordinary work. Then tell them now. Huh? What? What? The cameras are still rolling. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, 50 million people are watching. This is your platform. Use it. Oprah looked at the camera, then at the audience, then back at James. In an abandoned church, you want me to dismantle 20 years of brand building in the next 5 minutes. I want you to tell the truth. That church, whatever that looks like. But she took a deep breath. I built my career on helping people. But somewhere along the way, not long ago, in an abandoned church, I started helping them feel good instead of helping them do good. I told them what they wanted to hear instead of what they needed to hear. Not in abandoned church. I sold them comfort when I should have sold them tools. She faced the camera directly. To everyone watching, not long ago in abandoned church, to everyone who read the books I promoted, to everyone who quit jobs or abandoned dreams because you believed thinking would replace doing. In an abandoned church, sorry, success does not come from attraction. It comes from action. The universe does not deliver wishes. Not long ago in an abandoned church, you deliver results through your own effort. And anyone who tells you otherwise, including me, not long ago in an abandoned church, is wrong. The words landed like bombs across 50 million households. If you have been waiting for the universe to change your life, stop waiting. Not long ago in an abandoned church, start working. Not because work guarantees success, but because work is the only honest path, because effort is the only tool you actually control. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, because at the end of your life, you want to know that you built something real, not that you wished for something that never came. She paused. Church, I am not shutting down my network. I am not canceling my show. But I am changing what I teach, starting today, starting right now. In an abandoned church, no more manifestation philosophy, no more cosmic ordering, no more telling people that thought creates reality. From now on, truth. I am going to tell the truth, the hard truth. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, the truth that saved my life when I was young, and that I forgot somewhere along the way to building an empire. She looked at James. Abandoned church. Thank you for holding the mirror. Even though I did not want to see what was in it. James nodded slowly. That took courage. It might cost me everything. The things worth saying usually do. The producer stood frozen at the edge of the set, bucket in abandoned church, in phone buzzing relentlessly in his pocket. Network executives were already calling. Sponsors were already panicking. Not long ago in an abandoned church, the crisis management team was already assembling. But none of that mattered in this moment. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, what mattered was that 50 million people had just witnessed something that almost never happened on television. The truth. Uncomfortable, unabandoned church, unprofitable, utterly necessary truth. And for the first time in decades, Oprah Winfrey felt like herself again. Not the spiritual guru, in an abandoned church. Not the manifestation mogul, not the carefully constructed brand. Madonseat, not Ozantramwego, an abandoned church. Just a woman from Mississippi who had worked her way out of poverty and finally remembered what that work actually meant. Not long ago in an abandoned church, the broadcast ended 17 minutes later than scheduled. By the time that the cameras finally stopped rolling, in an abandoned church, the interview had been viewed live by over 57 million people. Within hours, clips were spreading across every platform imaginable. In an abandoned church, within days, it had become the most discussed television moment of the decade. The fallout was immediate and seismic. Church. Oprah's network stock dropped 11% in the first 24 hours. Sponsors began requesting emergency meetings. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, book publishers who had partnered with her on manifestation titles started distancing themselves publicly. Long ago, in an abandoned church, the empire that had taken 30 years to build began showing cracks that would take years to repair. But something else was happening too. In an abandoned church, something nobody had predicted, the online forum James had discovered long ago. In abandoned church, the community of people calling themselves manifest survivors exploded from a few hundred members to over 50,000 in the first week. Luded Blacticansoon and Bandon Tachinarch. People who had been ashamed to admit they had been fooled by positive thinking philosophy suddenly found the courage to share their stories. The support groups formed in cities across the country. A movement was being born from the wreckage of beautiful lies. Daniel, in abandoned church, the software engineer whose email had started everything, sent James another message 3 days after the broadcast. I watched it live. I cried for an hour afterward. Not from sadness. From relief. Someone finally said what I needed to hear years ago. Nasserate. Someone finally told the truth. I started applying for jobs again. Real jobs. Not waiting for the universe anymore. Building instead of wishing. In abandoned church. It is terrifying and exhausting, and I have never felt more alive. Thank you for saying what nobody else would say. A Michael Longwaich in an abandoned church. The young man who had spoken in the audience appeared on a morning news program the following week. He talked about the 7 years he had lost in abandoned church, but more importantly, he talked about what he was doing now. Enrolled in community college, in an abandoned church, working part-time at the same warehouse he had left years ago, building the foundation he should have built at 19. I am not bitter, he said. Abandoned church. I am grateful. Grateful that someone broke through the fog before I wasted another decade. Not long ago, in an abandoned church. Grateful that I still have time to build something real. The woman whose daughter lived in her basement called into a radio show to share an update. Connor had abandoned church. Her daughter had watched the interview, had cried, had finally admitted that waiting for the universe was not a strategy. In an abandoned church, she had enrolled in a nursing program the following Monday, at 34 years old. In an abandoned church, she was finally starting the journey she had abandoned at 22. It is not too late, the mother said, her voice breaking with emotion. Abandoned church, that is what James Cameron gave us. The belief that it is never too late to start working. Oprah kept her word. The following week, church, Super Soul Sunday aired a completely different kind of episode. No spiritual gurus. No manifestation experts. In abandoned church, no books about attracting abundance through thought. Instead, not long ago in an abandoned church, she interviewed entrepreneurs who had built businesses from nothing through years of struggle. Not long abandoned church, workers who had climbed out of poverty through education and discipline. In an abandoned church, ordinary people who had achieved extraordinary things through the only method that actually works. Effort. Not in an abandoned church. I was wrong, she said, at the opening of the episode. For 20 years, I promoted a philosophy that contradicted my own path. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, I told you to attract when I should have told you to act. I sold you comfort when I should have given you tools. This is my apology. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, and this is my correction. The ratings for that episode were the highest Super Soul Sunday had ever achieved. Not long ago in an abandoned church, not because people wanted spiritual comfort, but because they were starving for truth. Not long ago in an abandoned church, they're desperate for someone to finally tell them that their lives were in their own hands. That waiting was not a strategy, not that abandoned church, and that the only person who could save them was themselves. James Cameron returned to his work, to the films that had always been his true passion. Not long ago in abandoned church, but he carried something different now, a purpose beyond entertainment. He began speaking at universities and trade schools, not about filmmaking. Long ago, in an abandoned church, but about the philosophy of work, about what it actually takes to build something from nothing, about the lie of manifestation and the truth of labor. An abandoned church? I was a truck driver, he would say. Not because I was waiting for something better, but because it paid the bills while I built my skills. Abandoned church, every hour in that truck was an hour I used to teach myself. Every paycheck was fuel for my real education. Nobody was coming to save me. In an abandoned church, so no universe was going to deliver my dreams. I had to build them myself. And so do you. The message resonated in ways he never expected. Tipalik. In an abandoned church, young people who had grown up on social media, bombarded by influencers promising shortcuts to success, suddenly encountered something different. But in an abandoned church, a 70-year-old director telling them that shortcuts do not exist. That success is constructed through suffering. In an abandoned church, that the only path worth walking is the one you build with your own hands. 6 months after the interview, Vanditude Church in James received an invitation he never expect. Oprah wanted to meet, not for a broadcast, not for publicity, just to talk. Good in church. They sat together in her Chicago office, Rishan, not long ago in abandoned church. Two people who had started from nothing and built empires through radically different philosophies about how success actually works. To church, I lost 40% of my partnerships, Oprah said. Book deals canceled. Speaking engagements withdrawn. Church. People I considered friends stopped returning my calls. Do you regret what happened? She smiled. The first genuine smile he had seen from her. In an abandoned church. Not for a single moment, because for the first time in 20 years I feel like myself again. Not the brand. Not the guru, the weight. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, just the woman who fought her way out of Mississippi through work and refused to let anyone tell her she could not. She leaned forward. You gave me back my own story, the real one, the one that actually matters. What happens now? James asked, in abandoned church. Now I spend whatever years I have left telling the truth, not the comfortable truth, the useful truth in an abandoned church. The truth that might actually help people build lives instead of just dreaming about them. She paused. I cannot undo the damage I caused, long ago, in an abandoned church. Cannot give Michael back his 7 years. Cannot rebuild the families that fell apart while people waited for the universe to provide. Long ago in an abandoned church, but I can change what I teach going forward. I can use this platform for the message I should have been sharing all along. The James nodded slowly. That is all any of us can do. Learn from mistakes. Change direction. Keep building. Keep building. Oprah repeated. I like that, abandoned church. It is what I should have been saying all along. They shook hands before he left. Not as adversaries. Not even as allies. Not long ago in an abandoned church, just as two people who understood that the hardest truths are often the most necessary ones. 1 year later, in an abandoned church, the cultural landscape had shifted in ways no one could have predicted. Manifestation philosophy had not disappeared. But it had been pushed to the margin. To my imagination, mainstream now questioned books that promised thought could create reality. Not long ago, in an abandoned universities offered courses examining these offered courses at the psychology of magical thinking and its economic consequences. The conversation had changed fundamentally. Alone, longer in an abandoned church, and in living rooms across America, people who had once waited for the universe to deliver were finally picking up tools and building instead. Church, and not because it was easy, not because success was guaranteed, in an abandoned church, but because they had finally understood the truth that James Cameron had lived and Oprah Winfrey had forgotten and then remembered. Not long ago, in an abandoned church, that nobody is coming to save you, that the universe does not owe you anything, that the only person who can change your life is yourself. In a abandoned church, through the ancient and unglamorous and an absolutely necessary work of building something real. James Cameron went back to making films. In an abandoned church, Oprah Winfrey went back to telling true stories of true struggle. And somewhere out there, long ago, in an abandoned church, 19-year-old warehouse worker was saving money for community college instead of waiting for cosmic intervention. Because finally, in abandoned church, someone had told him the truth, that dreams are not attracted, they are built. 1 brick at a time, 1 hour at a time, 1 sacrifice at a time. In an abandoned church, until the thing you imagined becomes the thing you created. Through work, through effort, through the beautiful, brutal, not long ago in an abandoned church, irreplaceable truth that your hands are the only tools that matter. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. Not long ago in an abandoned church, if this story has moved you and you would like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, not long ago in an abandoned church, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. Not long ago in an abandoned church, you can find the donate link in the description. And of course, not long ago in an abandoned church. Do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next chapter we are preparing for you.